Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And we are so happy to kick off our webinar today with our host, Carlos Del Toro from OPM.
Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining today for this session on searching and applying for federal jobs, otherwise known as Navigating USA Jobs. And I'll talk about that in a little greater detail in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to formally introduce myself. My name is Carlos Del Toro, and I am a human resource specialist with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, or OPM for short. And I'd like to take you through the material today. And I'll give you sort of an overview of where we're going to be going during the course of the morning. But first, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Lee. Ms. Lee is Deputy Director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. She, in this role, Rebecca supports the coordination and implementation of federal programs and initiatives to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. So with that, Rebecca, please feel free to chime in.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and hello, everyone. On behalf of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, or what we call WHIAANHPI, I'd like to welcome everyone to this important informational session on navigating USA jobs and finding a job in the federal government. We are so thrilled to be partnering with Carlos here and the U.S. Office on Personnel Management, or OPM, on this session. Our White House initiative, which was reestablished and reinvigorated last May by President Joe Biden through Executive Order 14031, is working to drive an ambitious whole of government agenda to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander, or AANHPI communities. And as part of that agenda, we're working to build a government that truly represents the people it serves, not only through relevant programs and services, but also in its composition at all levels. We know that AANHPIs make up only 5% of executives in the federal government, yet 7% of the general population. And Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders in particular are underrepresented at all levels in the federal workforce. So through today's session and our ongoing work, we're working to build a stronger pipeline for AANHPIs so that those at the table here at the federal government reflect the true diversity of our nation. We also know that the process to get into the federal government can sometimes be daunting. So we hope that today's session will help make this process a bit easier and more manageable. Our goal is that today you'll learn how to navigate USA jobs and be able to find and apply for the federal jobs that interest you and for which you are qualified for. You can also read and make sense of federal job postings known as job announcements and effectively market yourself to federal agencies. So thanks all for being here today, and I wish you all the best in your job search journey. Our nation needs individuals like you from AANHPI communities to meet the complex challenges that our government faces and to deliver on behalf of the American people, and I'm confident that you're up to that challenge. Thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Carlos.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for creating an opportunity for us to look at the specifics of how to apply for federal jobs. And I hope that at the end of this session, everyone will feel that you have some practical understanding, not just a theoretical, abstract understanding, but the ability to actually go into USA Jobs and conduct some job searches and apply for positions should you decide to do that. So here's what I'd like to cover today, and this is just a general direction in which we will go. I want to talk a little bit about USA Jobs itself, because I don't want to assume that everyone knows what it is. Most of you probably have some understanding of it, but I don't want to make any major assumptions, because some of you may be coming to it for the 20th time and others for the first time. So we'll talk a little bit about USA Jobs, and then we'll talk about how to actually create an account in USA Jobs. And we thought it might be helpful to you, not just to show you some slides today, right, which is sort of the typical thing that often happens, but what we'd like to do is actually demonstrate the system, because in a live environment, sometimes you can capture some nuance that is not always there when you're presenting slides. So we'll talk about how to create and manage your USA Jobs account. Then we'll go into the heart of why you're likely here, which is how do you actually conduct job searches in USA Jobs. And then when you get results from the criteria that you input, then how do you interpret those results? We'll talk about what we call job announcements, which are essentially federal job postings. Excuse me. And then we'll go into, towards the latter part, we'll talk about the 5-step application process, and I'll demonstrate that as well. And then after you've submitted an application, what happens after that? What do you have to look forward to once you've actually submitted an application? And I'll round off the presentation with with some information about the USA Jobs Help Center, because that's where you can go for additional resources. So you're going to get a lot, I believe, through our session today, but in an hour, as you can imagine, you don't really have a lot of time to go into anything in great depth. You'll have plenty in order to be able to go in and conduct job searches and start applying, but you'll probably want to explore in terms of getting some frequently asked questions and how-tos and things of that nature. And I'll show you where you can go right within USA Jobs in order to do that. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to take you to the live USA Jobs environment, and we're going to take a step-by-step overview of USA Jobs, okay? Now, we're going to have plenty of time for questions later. We built in some time towards the end of the presentation, so I want to give you most of the basics first and just kind of go through that nonstop. And then we'll leave about 10, 15 minutes towards the end for any specific questions that you have. You can put those questions in the chat at the bottom of your screen, and someone will be monitoring the chat and going through those questions, and then we'll try to find the ones, because there are lots of people here today. So we'll try to find questions that are sort of go across the board, the basic types of questions that everyone is trying to get answers for. And by the way, a recording of this will be available at some point, so we can share that information with you a little bit later. So without further ado, let's talk about USA Jobs in general. So when you go to www.usajobs.gov, www.usajobs.gov, and by the way, you'll see this written differently. You'll see it written as capital USA Jobs. Some people will do capital U and a little bit of a difference between USA and then jobs, lowercase. Doesn't matter. Any way will get you into USA Jobs, okay? Lowercase is fine. As a matter of fact, if you look at the top of my screen here, you'll just see it all in lowercase letters. So www.usajobs.gov will bring you to this main screen. This is the main landing page for USA Jobs. And I wanted to show you the layout of USA Jobs because it's going to help you intuitively to find the areas that are going to help you. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what USA Jobs is. Again, no assumptions today. USA Jobs is the federal government's main employment portal. Now, I say main employment portal, why? Because that's not the only place you can go technically to find federal jobs. And that might be surprising to some of you, but here's the deal. Every federal agency has a career or employment section on their website. You could technically go to each individual agency and look for their careers section or employment section and find jobs in that agency. But what's going to happen if you find jobs that are within what we call the competitive civil service? They're going to redirect you here, because USA Jobs is the front face for many of the agencies. And when we're talking about USA Jobs, we're talking about mainly the executive branch agencies. So we're talking about agencies like the 15 major departments: Department of Agriculture, Department of Interior, Education, Department of Justice, Department of Health and Human Services, et cetera. And we're talking about many, many other agencies, independent agencies, mid-level, larger size agencies, but mainly the ones used by executive branch agencies. Why is that important to know? Well, it's important, and I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. That's important because there are federal jobs that you will not find necessarily only on USA Jobs or at all on USA Jobs. Why is that? That's because most of the jobs that you see on USA Jobs, as I've already mentioned, are within what's called the competitive civil service. So you don't have to remember all the technical details of that, but when someone talks about joining the federal civil service, typically that's what they mean. They mean joining a job that has civil service protections and a certain way in which to hire, and it's backed by certain laws and rules and regulations that offer the ability to come into the competitive service a certain way as compared to other jobs within the federal government that have their own hiring system and that follow a different set of rules that maybe look a little bit like what you do when you go through USA Jobs, but they may have their own way of doing things. For example, if you wanted to be an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, typically you'd have to go directly to the FBI site for that. Or if you want to work for the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, it's not likely you're going to find jobs through USA Jobs because you want to go directly to the CIA site. Some agencies have a mix. For example, Department of State, if you want to work for the Foreign Service, you're going to want to go not to USA Jobs, but directly to the Department of State's website, and they have their own set of rules and application procedures for that aspect of Department of State. However, they also have certain types of jobs that are in the competitive civil service. So for those jobs, they would redirect you here. So I don't want to be confusing about this, but it's important that you understand that most federal jobs, you're going to want to come to USA Jobs, but you can also check the agency websites individually to see if there are jobs that may not appear on USA Jobs. But this is always a good place to start because most federal jobs are going to start here. And please understand this as well, because this tends to confuse many people. You are starting your application process with USA Jobs. USA Jobs is sort of the front end of that application process. But as you're going to see as we proceed through the presentation, you are not typically finished within USA Jobs. You would need to go directly to the agency's website in order to complete your application. So I'm going to describe a 5-step application process in a little bit. The 5th step is taking you to the agency's website where you're going to finish the application process. So don't worry about remembering all this now because I'm going to go through it in great detail later. But I want you to understand that your application begins in USA Jobs typically, but it's not going to be completed until you do it in the agency's website. And that brings out another important point, why USA Jobs is so important. Years ago, if you wanted to find a federal job, you would have to go to umpteen places in order to get that information. The whole reason that USA Jobs exists is because we, the federal government, wanted to provide a central place where you could begin this process. So instead of going to each individual agency, let's say you wanted to apply to 7 different positions, you don't have to go to 7 agency websites in order to do that, right? You come here to USA Jobs, and then you could find all those agencies under this umbrella of USA Jobs, and you can apply directly through USA Jobs. Now, that being said, it's important to understand that you can't just complete one application and then you're done and you're being considered for everything. That's not how it works, right? You actually have to apply individually for each separate position for which you want to be considered. And I'm going to show you how you could search for those and how you can apply for those. And you're going to see that in the direct live environment in USA Jobs, okay? One other example, I mentioned things like CIA, Department of State, and I said that these jobs are typically ones used by executive branch agencies. So if you wanted to work, let's say, for the legislative branch, if you want to work for the Senate, for the House of Representatives, you would have to go to their websites and find their application procedures, right? You'll also find the same thing for the judicial branch. So if you're looking for mainly executive branch, this is where you'll go. Otherwise, you're going to want to go to other types as I described, okay? So with that in mind, let's start looking in greater detail at USA Jobs itself. So I'm going to take you to the USA Jobs environment. And this, as I said, is at www.usajobs.gov. And this is a screen that you're going to find. This is your main landing page. So notice right off the bat that you can start doing searches right away. You can put in keywords if you know the job title or a specific agency, or if you just want to input information based on your particular background, you know, economics, accounting, attorney, or whatever it may be. You would put that in the keywords, and then you can include a location and hit the search button, and you already have several things. That's great, but it doesn't give you very much in terms of specifics, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you can customize that search so that you can find jobs that make more sense for you and your background. But before we go there, let's take a look at the rest of this page here, this landing page. So you have 3 tabs that are helpful on this page. So the very first one is the one that says start using USA Jobs. And it shows you all the different things that you can do using USA Jobs. So you can save your favorite jobs and searches. What does that mean? It means that if you are looking at an announcement, at a job announcement, which is a job posting, and let's say you don't have time to apply for that right now, but you want to revisit it, you can save that search. And I'll show you later when we go into your profile where you would find that. You could save that search, and then you could return to it before that announcement closes to the public so that you can decide if you want to apply for that job. You can upload your resumes and documents, and we're going to talk about that in great detail. Your resumes and supporting documents are what are going to constitute your application, and we'll talk in detail on that, so I'm going to hold off on that discussion. You can make a resume searchable. When we get to resumes, I'll speak more about that, so let's skip that for just a minute. And of course, you can apply for jobs through USA Jobs. That's how you're going to do it. Now, why is it important to know all this? Well, because right now, you could go up here and you could start searching for jobs to your heart's content. And you can search for as many as you want, and you could do that without any kind of extra information in the system in terms of your personal information. But what happens is that once you decide that you want to communicate with USA Jobs in some way, whether that's saving a job announcement or saving a search, we'll talk about that as well, or of course, applying for a job, at that point, we have to have specifics on how to reach you, what's your email, what's your phone number if we need to contact you, etc. Okay. So at that point, you need a profile, which is the reason why we're encouraging everyone from the get-go to create a profile. So as soon as you go into USA Jobs, as you could see here, you have this large red button, view profile, because we want to make that front and center, right? We want to encourage everyone to apply, to set up a profile, to set up an account, because at some point, if you're serious about the federal job search, you're going to need to have that profile. And we're going to go into that profile in great detail in just a few minutes, okay? Now, you see this section here that says explore hiring paths. We'll return to this when we talk about the profile, but notice that you have many categories here. And what this does is it speaks to the potential for you being eligible for federal work based on your specific background. For example, if you are a current student or a recent graduate, there's a section that explains what are known as the pathways programs, among other types of positions. And this gives you great detail on possible entryways into the federal government based on the fact that you're a student now or that you're a recent student. If you are a veteran, there may be certain things that you could potentially qualify for or be eligible for, rather, that would require for you to meet certain conditions as a veteran that others would not be able to do. So you would go to that section to get more information on that. If you are currently or have been in the past a federal employee in the competitive civil service, there's a section for you as well, because there are some jobs that are open for you to apply that are not open for members of the general public who could only apply using open to the public or any of these other categories for which they'd be eligible based on their background. If you're an individual with a disability, with certain types of disabilities, severe physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities, or psychiatric disabilities, there's a special, what we call hiring authority that for which you may be able to enter the federal government, and you get more information on that here, okay? So all of these speak to eligibility. Are you potentially eligible for these types of jobs so that you can get into the federal government through this avenue? And you might meet several of these abilities here. So this is here so that you can get specific information. And while I'm on that topic, one of the things I love to do in my job is to totally demystify this process, right? It's not always easy to do that. And sometimes folks get really intimidated by this process, but I promise you, if you take it step by step, you're going to see that it's really fairly intuitive. You just got to take it step by step. There's certain nuances when you're applying for federal jobs that you don't usually have to worry about when you're applying for jobs, let's say in the private sector. And that's why sometimes folks feel that this process is very complicated. And, depending on your definition of complicated, it may or may not be, right? But from my perspective, it's absolutely doable. And I want to encourage everyone to continue researching and applying, because you'll see that it is it's not necessarily easy, but it is absolutely doable as long as you're keeping these nuances in mind, okay? So eligibility is different than qualified. And sometimes I think folks get that a little confused when we say, are you eligible for a job as compared to being qualified for a job? So let me just very briefly explain the difference so that you can understand that terminology when you run across it. When we say that you are eligible to apply for a federal job, it means that you meet certain criteria that other folks who don't meet that criteria lack to be able to apply for that job. So for example, if you are applying for one of the student recent graduates positions, which is known as the recent graduates program. It's part of what we call the pathways programs. We're not going to talk a lot about that today, but the pathways programs are one of the ways that you can get into federal government if you're a student or a recent graduate. The recent graduates program requires that at the time that you apply, you will have graduated no more than 2 years prior. So if you received your degree, let's say 4 years ago, you are no longer eligible for that to apply for those types of jobs, right? Because you don't meet the criteria. Probably the most common one is federal employees. If you have never been or are not currently a federal employee, and specifically in the competitive civil service, you are not eligible to apply for a job that says it's open only to federal employees. So it's important for you to know that, so that when you look at job announcements and job postings, you don't take time to apply for things for which you're not eligible. You want to find those things that you can in fact apply for, so that you can be fully considered based on your eligibility. Okay. Now, the other thing, qualified, are you qualified for the job? It means what you probably think it means. And that means, do I meet the knowledge, skills, and abilities or competencies in order to be able to function well in this position? That's usually expressed in terms of your education or your experience, or a combination of the two. So when you go into a job announcement and you see the section on qualifications, it's going to say things like a bachelor's degree in economics, a bachelor's degree in accounting that includes at least 24 credit hours in finance, auditing, whatever it may be, or 2 years of progressively responsible experience doing X, Y, and Z. That's qualifications, okay? So in order to be able to be considered for a position, you will typically have to meet eligibility and be qualified for the job. So just keep in mind that those two things are separate, and you need to make sure that when you complete your application, that you keep those things in mind so that you are able to apply for that job and be considered, okay? All right. And remember, I'm going to open this up for other questions. So if you have questions, please jot them down and we'll get to them a little bit later. Now, you also have one more thing on this page here, and that's actually two things. You have some myths that are described here. We won't go into that today, but the events section will point out some upcoming, typically virtual presentations. Sometimes it'll be referring to an in-person job fair for which you'd have to register, but you can go through this section and take a look at what's being offered. And if there's a registration link, it'll be included here. So for example, the information I'm sharing with you today, we give this presentation a lot, not exactly in this format, but we offer this presentation on navigating USA jobs. We are working out some details right now on how better to do that. However, once we start posting them, you're going to want to pay attention to that, because it'll allow you in the future to go into another webinar and learn something, either reviewing this information or other things that we present. For example, we do a whole session on writing your federal resume, because as you can imagine, there are certain nuances. I like that word a lot because it really applies in federal jobs. There are certain nuances in applying for federal jobs and in preparing your resume to be considered for federal employment that you would not normally consider if you're applying for a job in the private sector or some other nonprofit, for example. So keep an eye on that events section, because you're not going to find them now, but very shortly you should see some openings for webinars on navigating USA jobs, which is essentially this. writing your federal resume. We have one on interviewing techniques and some other ones as well. So just keep that in mind for the future. So the events section is another useful feature of the USA Jobs site. But let's go a little bit deeper into the USA Jobs system here. And specifically, let's go over to the profile. So you'll notice that at the top here, you will see that I already have my account up and running. And this one, of course, is a test account. Now, if you were coming into USA Jobs for the first time, and I can't do it now because I would have to lose this connection. But if you went into USA Jobs for the first time, up here, you would see that you could use this to either sign in or create an account. This is where you would do that up here. So if you've never visited USA Jobs specifically to create an account, you're going to find that in this upper section here to either sign in or create your account or your profile. And when you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to be taken through a few step process in order to create your account. And that will entail using your email address, which is going to be your user ID. So you're going to want to remember that user ID because it's going to be the one that you're going to use, that email, because it's going to be the one that you use for your future ID. And then it'll guide you on the specific criteria for creating an effective password. And once you've done that, you're also going to be required to put in a code that USA Jobs will send you. USA Jobs operates, I won't get too technical here, but USA Jobs operates under something called two-factor authentication. And some of you may be familiar with that from other applications that you've dealt with in the past. So two-factor authentication just means that you have to go through 2 layers of security to make sure that your information is not hacked, right? So what will happen is that once you've created your account, every time you go into USA Jobs, you're going to use that same link up here to sign in. And when you come to the main sign-in screen, it's going to ask for your user ID, which is your email, and for your password, and you're going to put your password in. And then you're going to get a code that's going to complete the process. You're going to have to input that code to complete the process. Typically, what will happen is you'll get texted. You actually, when you set up your account, you'll be able to set that up in a way that makes sense for you. So you can do it by a text message. You could do it with a phone call, where you'll get a call and they'll say, this is your code. Or you could do it using a special app on your smartphone in order to access that code. But most people, I find, you will typically do it through texting, and then you'll get a code, you'll put in that code, and then immediately you're brought to the dashboard. So when I talk about the dashboard, this is what I'm speaking of. This is your USA Jobs homepage, okay? So on your dashboard, you're going to see 2 main sections, and we're going to take these in turn. So at the top here, going from left to right, you have the home button, which is always going to bring you here to this main page, okay? And I'm going to make this screen just a bit smaller for a minute so that you can see just the full layout of this, okay? And I'll increase the size in just a moment. So the home screen, the home button will take you to this home page. Moving to the right is the section for your profile. That's your account information, and we'll look at that in very great detail. The documents section is where you're going to input your resumes and your supporting documents. And then the preferences section is going to allow you to put in preferences with regard to your hiring and your application considerations. In other words, things like, am I willing to travel? Do I want to see only full-time things? Would I mind seeing temporary things or part-time work, or do I only want to see full-time, and many other such preferences? So we'll look at each of these in turn, but let's start out by taking a look at this center one as well. You have 3 main tabs in the center. You have applications, and that's going to explain everything that you're doing with regard to any open applications at the moment, okay? So if you look at this page here on this test screen, there are a number of applications that this person has put in, okay? We'll come back to this later. We'll come back to this entire section, but I want to at least introduce you. Remember I talked about saving jobs? This is a job that this person would like to revisit later. So here's a saved job. And there's also saved searches. Searches allow USA Jobs to do work for you. So instead of you having to come into USA Jobs and create a new search from scratch every time you come into USA Jobs, you can create searches, save them here, and then USA Jobs will monitor when anything comes in, when a posting comes in that meets your search criteria, and then you will be emailed that something else has opened up that meets your search criteria. And then you could decide if you want to take a closer look and apply. So we will come back to the center section, but that's an introduction to everything on your dashboard. Let's go into specifics in terms of each of these sections here. So the home page, the home button, keep wanting to say the home page. The home button will always bring you back here to the dashboard, to the main section of the dashboard. Moving to the right, you have your profile. Your profile is where you're going to input all of the information that we need to be able to contact you, and that speaks to your particular situation with regard to these hiring paths and your background, your federal experience, if you have any, your military experience, if you have any experience, and education, etc. So let me just point out here before we continue that you need to complete a profile for a number of reasons. But when you complete your profile, you're going to see that a lot of the things, like I just mentioned, experience, education, etc. These are things that you would typically have on your resume. You are not completing a resume when you do your profile. So please understand that. Please understand that you will need to create a resume, either one of your own through something like Microsoft Word, or you're going to build it from within USA Jobs. And we'll talk about the USA Jobs resume builder as well. But you'll need to create a resume because your resume serves as your main application. So please understand that when you complete your profile, you're going to have a lot of similar information, but it has to be matched with your resume so that when you're actually applying for positions, you're not going to just use the agencies are not going to use the profile per se. They're going to use the resume that you submit in application to that job. Okay. So here are the various elements of the profile. So this is the basic information, address, right? The email, of course, is your user ID. Login.gov is just a system that we use for that two-factor authentication, but you're going to create your own password. This is just for testing purposes. There's a section on citizenship. And by the way, for each one of these, notice that you're going to see a dialog box on the right-hand side. Okay, so for the citizenship one, you're going to see the various choices here. And then on the right-hand side, you'll typically see some information to help you to better understand what it is that you're completing. So you have all these nice dialog boxes in USA Jobs to be able to prompt you and to help you to better understand what it is that you're filling out. Okay, so citizenship, hiring paths. I spoke in great detail about the hiring paths. We'll take a closer look at maybe one or two of those in just a minute. But we use hiring paths to help identify eligible jobs, right? Jobs that for which you can actually apply. Review and select the hiring paths that apply to you. This is helpful because when you start to create searches, it's going to tell USA Jobs that there are certain things that you would like to be considered for based on your background. But it also helps when, remember we saw earlier the searchable feature of the resume. We'll talk about that when we get to the resumes, but it'll help to coordinate what is happening with your resume and these hiring paths. So it's important for you, if you want to fill this out, okay? But notice that it is optional to do the hiring paths, but it can be helpful when you're doing your searches. The experience, if you have any federal experience, you would input that. If you have any military service, you would input that. So let me just show you what some of these screens look like, okay? Notice on the right-hand side, again, dialog boxes to give you some more information about, specifically in this case, military service, because this can be useful to help you be considered for what's called preference later. And I won't go into detail about that, about certain special hiring authorities for veterans, like the Veterans Employment Opportunity Act of 1998, and then any other important information. If you're doing work experience, okay, you can just start adding your work experience here, and that'll take you to a screen that will give you the specifics here. Okay, and again, remember, this is not completing a resume. This is all profile here. Okay, and then you can go to the education section, which in this case here is optional. You can add education. There's demographic information, which again is optional. So if you want to put in things like sex, ethnicity, race, etc., disability, serious health conditions, okay, you can put all of that in. And you can just pay close attention to what's considered optional. Some people are not comfortable with that. That's fine. And what things are considered to be mandatory. So if it doesn't say optional, then obviously that's something that is required in order for you to complete your profile. So notice that most sections here are in fact optional. Languages that may be helpful for you in the job, organizations to which you belong, references, right? So a lot of these things that you would put on your resume, you may or may not put them on your profile depending on preference, but there are certain things that you will definitely put in there. So complete your profile as quickly as possible, I'd suggest, because that way you'll already be in the system, you'll have your account set up, and then when you start to apply, that's one step that's already taken care of. And notice also a dialog box to the right here that asks what you want to do next. You want to find a job, it'll take you to start doing some searches. Do you want to turn on email notifications? Do you want to learn more about finding a job in the government? It'll take you to the help section, that help center that I mentioned to you earlier, okay? So once you complete your profile, you can go to the right of that and you can start inputting documents. So two types of documents, your resume and other supporting documents. Your resume is something that you're always going to want to put in there, have to put in there, right? Because it is your application. So unlike when you're applying, let's say for the private sector, where they may have their own specific application, when you're applying for federal jobs, your resume is your application. That's why we do a whole webinar specifically on preparing your resume for federal jobs, because there are specific things that you want to take into account when you're dealing with your resume for federal jobs that you would not normally do when you're applying for jobs out in the private sector. Quick example, I won't go into great detail, but sometimes when you're completing a resume in, let's say, your Word document, you'll say, I completed this job, I did this job from 2020 to 2022. That's great. And you're applying for a job that says you need 2 years of experience doing X, Y, and Z. So you say, there it is, 2 years, 2020 to 2022, not so fast. Is that January 2020 to January 2022? Or is that December 2020 to January 2022? It's a difference of almost a year, right? So no, unless you put at least, it doesn't have to be to the day, but unless you put the month, year, we won't know if you actually have it. And that's important because you can wind up being screened out for that. You will likely be if that's all the information you have in there, you'll probably be screened out for that because it's not enough information. We can't assume that you have 2 full years. Okay, so now let's go back. Let's say you put in January 2020 to January 2022. There it is, 2 years. Oh, not so fast. Was that all full-time work? Why am I going through this? Sometimes people will come to me at a job fair and they'll say to me, that's civil service stuff. I just don't believe in it. And it's got to be who you know, whatever. And I say, why do you say that? And they say, well, I've been applying for jobs for the last, 2 years, and I keep being told that I'm not eligible, or I never hear anything back. And I said, do you have your resume with you? And I look at the resume, and what is it? It's a one-pager with very brief information that doesn't give nearly enough information to be able to make an adequate determination about the person's qualifications. So I look at the one pager, and sure enough, 2020 to 2022. And if the job says 2 years, I know they're going to get screened out, because you can't wind up hiring that person with only that information. And by the way, when you're applying for a job for which 500 other people are applying, I promise you that the HR person sitting in the agency is not going to call 500 people to ask them what they meant by such and such thing in their resume, right? So you have to, the onus is on you to be really complete in that resume and to make sure that you make your business case, so to speak, on paper and theoretically on your resume, okay? So it's important to know that you have to be really specific on that. And I won't give you much more because it'll take us in a completely different direction. But let's go back to USA Jobs. But you want to complete your resume, and that's the single best thing that you can do to be considered for federal jobs, is to do a great job on your resume. Now, in addition to your resume, you have other. Notice, by the way, before we leave the resume, there's a parenthetical here that says 3 out of 5. Let me make this just a little bit larger. It says 3 out of 5. What does that mean? You can include up to 5 resumes in USA Jobs. So why might you need 5 resumes? Well, if you're a student, you just finished getting your degree, or if you have very little work experience, 1 resume may be just fine, right? So you don't have to have 5 resumes. But what if you've been in the workforce for 20 years? Well, it's probably not a good idea to try to cram 20 years of experience and education into 1 resume. Your resume can certainly be more than 1 page. As a matter of fact, it probably should be for various reasons that I won't get into right now. However, trying to cram 20 years of experience into a resume can be rather daunting. And it can, when someone's reviewing in HR and the agency to try to determine if you're qualified for a job, it can be very complicated to go through a 20 years of experience on 1 resume. So you might want to separate those work experiences. Let's say you've worked on 3 or 4 different things in the course of 20 years. You're going to want to create maybe 3 different resumes that focus on those specific things. So for example, if you work in administration is very broad, right? It could be human resources, it could be purchasing, it could be budgeting. So rather than cram all that into 1 resume, you might want to consider doing 3 resumes, one of which focuses on HR, right? Human resources, one of which focuses on budget, and one of which focuses on procurement, so that when you're applying for a budget analyst position, you go pull the budget one, right? And that one is detailed. You're still mentioning the other stuff because you're not going to show gaps in employment. But for that particular application, you're going to pull up the one that's specifically directed towards specifying your HR, your budget work in that example, so that you have it and you're really explaining that in great detail. So that's why you might need up to 5 resumes. Okay. And by the way, you create that resume either in, let's say, Word, and you can just upload it and bring it in. And I'll show you that a little bit later, or you could build it from scratch using the resume builder. So some combination of those 2, you could do up to 5 resumes. And then you have these supporting documents. What are supporting documents? Examples. Well, it's a little bit hard to tell from these things here, but if you have a performance appraisal that's required for this position, you always want to check the how to apply because it'll tell you what you need. So if you want to put a performance appraisal, that's part of it. If you want to include a cover letter, which by the way is optional, it's not mandatory, you can include a cover letter here. School transcripts can be scanned and put in here. If you're a federal employee, some of you are federal employees, you might be required to put in an SF-50, which is a personnel document that shows a specific action that was taken on you during the course of your federal career, and SF-50 would go in here as well. If you are a veteran and you're showing the extent of your active service, your DD-214 is the document that shows that. Copy of your DD-214 would go here. If you are applying for that special hiring authority that I mentioned earlier for individuals with disabilities, if you have a proof of disability letter, it would go in here. All the supporting documents, up to 10 of them, you can include here, okay? And together, the resume plus any necessary supporting documents constitute your full application. Notice I said any necessary document. In other words, don't go put everything, everything in the kitchen sink in your application. You have to go to the how to apply section of the announcement to see what is actually required, and we'll take a look at that shortly. All right, so that's your documents. Preferences are the things I mentioned earlier that will help you when you're conducting searches. Are you willing to travel? Are you willing to relocate? Do you only want to see permanent work, or would you consider temporary work or part-time work or details, et cetera, right? What type of work schedule? Only full-time, or would you do intermittent? Would you do job sharing, et cetera? So all of these sections here help you to have a complete profile. And once you have your profile, you're ready to go to races. Let's take a look at searching. Okay. So now let's say you want to search. So what you could do is you can go to these keywords. And as I said, you can put in, let's say you want to do human resources work. Notice as soon as I start typing in, immediately you start coming up with all kinds of potential job titles and agencies that deal with human resources and occupations. So that's one search feature. Or you could just leave that as human resources. And as far as location, well, let's say you want to work in Washington, D.C. And by the way, quick little interactive thing here. Please put in the chat, where do you think most federal jobs are found? Go ahead and write that in the chat. Where do you think most federal jobs are found? Anybody? DC area, DC? Right, so most folks are putting in DC area. Would it surprise you to know that at last count, about roughly between 15 and 20% of the jobs are found in the DC area, and about 80, is my math right? 85%, 80% are found outside of the DC area. That's very surprising to some people, and I could understand why. But just keep that in mind. Sometimes people are dissuaded from applying because they say, I don't want to relocate to DC. You don't have to. Federal jobs are everywhere. Okay, just keep that in mind. But in any event, when you go to location, I'm just using DC as an example, and notice now on the left-hand side here, that's now a filter, Washington, DC. And it'll typically put you within 25 miles. Now, I want to show you something else here. You see on the right-hand side here, it says you're no longer using filters from your profile for the search. Well, if I put this little toggle button on, now it's just added a bunch of filters here. Where do these things come from? See them in green here? Well, that came from your preferences when you set up your account. So rather than have to go and put these in every time you come into USA Jobs to do a search, you have them in your profile. You could just toggle this. But if you wanted to just start from scratch, you just toggle it the other way, and then you can start putting in your own filters. What are the filters that I'm referring to? Well, on the right-hand side here, notice that you have filters like the hiring paths. So if you look at the hiring paths, you see the ones that are open to the public. So maybe you want to only look at the ones open to the public. And by the way, without the filter, take a look at the left-hand side here. I'm just going to put the ones in DC. It says viewing 1 to 25 of 872 jobs. Okay. But if I start adding filters to it, if I say only jobs open to the public, notice it went down to 375. You could usually see on the right-hand side of the filter how many jobs would meet that criteria. And by the way, there's overlap. So it's not only 375 that are open to the public, or these are only for students and recent graduates necessarily, or there's some overlap between these. Just keep that in mind. But this certainly helps you to whittle it down to get down to where it's more manageable for you. Okay. If you are a federal employee who is in the competitive service, you might want to see not only the ones open to the public, but also the ones that are open to the competitive service. And now that bumps this number up to 696 potential jobs. And notice the icons, right? So for the competitive service, you have this like little building, federal building icon. Open to the public, it's just a multitude here, a crowd here. So if you look at the ones that are open to feds, notice that as soon as you put the filter in, it increases the number. And those are ones that only feds can apply for. And notice on the right-hand side, you have the icon in there. But notice that this doesn't have the one that's open to the public. So this would not be one that if you've never been in the federal government that you should apply for, because you will not be considered eligible for that. Okay. But as you go down, let's take out that competitive service one. And now everything here is only open to the public, right? Not only open to the public, but these are the ones that are included with this filter, and you could see that icon, and that's always a good check. And if you would go to this job and look on the right-hand side, this section here used to be just a blue section here, but it's in this section, this job is open to. Notice it mentions that it's open to the public. And if you want to go and get more specifics on that, you can go directly to the hiring path. And this is the same thing that you would find if you were on the main page looking at those various hiring paths, and it can give you specific information. If you're a U.S. citizen or national, you can apply to jobs that are open to the public. Okay. So let's go back to our search. And let's take a look at these filters. So in addition to the hiring path filters, there are actually many, many filters. So if you wanted to find jobs only within a certain salary range, let's say you want to see things starting at 60,000 and going up to realistically for you maybe let's say 134,000, 130,000. Notice how it keeps changing depending on how you use that slide. Or if you're a federal employee, or you don't have to be a federal employee, if you happen to know what the grade level would pay, and you want to see everything that's GS5, GS7, GS9, let's say, let's take out of these. Then you can just limit this, and it will show you only results that are general schedule 5, 8, 9, whatever it is that we put in there. Okay. So these are filters that you can use to help you to narrow down your search. Department and agency. Maybe you've only ever wanted to work at Department of Agriculture. Well, if you put that in there, now it's just brought this down to 7 jobs because maybe you only want to work at agriculture. I remember one person that her dream job was to work at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And that was her, that's what I'm going to do, FEMA. So I can see her going on to USA Jobs and finding only FEMA jobs, right? Or maybe you always wanted to work for the Department of Army, and now you can just find the Department of Army jobs. So you can narrow this down quite a bit. Or let's try another filter. Let's say you know the occupational series. Every federal job belongs to a family, and the family is expressed as a 4-digit number. Well, 4-digit number, that's redundant. It's 4 digits. So for example, my family, my series is Human Resources Specialist, which is 0201. But it stands to reason that anything that's 0200 is related, right? So if you look at 0201, we don't actually happen to have others right now, but if you look at 0201, and if you wanted to be a human resource assistant, maybe you're not eligible to apply for human resource management, but maybe you're a human resource assistant. Usually, if there are positions available, it would be 0203, and then you can select that one as well. Or if you hit something like the 0300 series, you have management, administrative, and clerical, and then so you don't have a whole lot here, but here's a good example. The engineering and architect, 0800 family. General engineering would be 0801, but then you have architecture that's similar, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering with different numbers, but within the same family. So sometimes you're not sure where to begin. Well, this is a good place to begin if you want to try to find things that are similar to your particular occupational series. That could be helpful to you when you're searching for jobs. And there are other filters as well. So we won't go through all those, but location, you can stretch this out. Maybe you'll be willing to travel 50 miles. That might open up more possibilities. Maybe you want to look only at remote jobs. Since the pandemic, some people only want to stick with remote jobs. That will severely limit you in terms of the numbers out here, but that's a way that you can search to remote jobs by work schedule, apartment type. You get the idea, okay? So this is how you search for a job. And when you find the results, you're going to see them on the left-hand side, and they're going to give you specifics, but only to a very limited degree. So if you look at this administrative program assistant, this is something that's open to all U.S. citizens, but it's also, there's more specific information. It's open from August 26th to September 12th. But if you want to go deeper, and you really must, you have to look at the entire job announcement. This only gives you a snapshot, kind of a quickie look, but you have to go to the specific announcement by selecting the hyperlink for the job title, and then that'll take you through the entire announcement, okay? So let's take a look at the announcement and some main points here, and then I'll show you how to actually put in an application, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So the administrative program assistant here is with Department of Army. They give you a summary about the agency, okay, and about the position. It tells you who the job is open to, so you could confirm that it's open to you. So let's say you've never been part of the federal government before. This is one that you want to do, right? Because you don't want to apply for one that says open to competitive service or federal employees only, because you won't be considered for that position because you're not eligible for that. So let's say this is one works for you, the public. Then you look at the duties section, and notice as I'm scrolling through this, that every announcement is set up pretty much the same way. The summary, who the job is open to. Look at this left-hand navigation up here, right? Summary, this job is open to, then the duties, the requirements, how you will be evaluated, required documents, and how to apply. So as I'm scrolling, you can either go directly to the section here using the link, or you could just scroll down in the announcement and it'll take you to the same sections, okay? So the duty section is going to tell you the responsibilities and the duties that you'd be expected to perform. And that can be very helpful when you're preparing your resume, because it'll give you language to use when you're preparing your resume because of things that you've done in the past that look similar to the duties that you'd be expected to perform. The requirements is going to express any conditions of employment. It's going to express, as I said earlier, your education, your experience, but it's going to specify how much of that experience and the quality of that experience. So in this particular case, Education is one option, 1 full year of graduate level education, etc., or combination of education experience or the specialized experience. So you want to go through that entire thing because there may be multiple ways in which you could potentially be qualified for something. Don't just think it's just one way. If it is just one way, it'll be expressly put here in the announcement. But you may have several options like here with these ors, and you want to read through that carefully because there may be more than one way that you could qualify. Okay. Then you have the how you will be evaluated section. So it tells you what, if you're considered basically qualified for the job, how do they now distinguish between everyone who meets the basic qualifications and who is best qualified? And this explains how that's going to be done, how the basis for that rating. So it gives you a lot of information in the announcement. I know it's a lot of reading, but it's really good information to have so that you can make better, more informed decisions. The required documents section, crucial, right? Because you have to know, in addition to your resume, what other supporting documents are needed. So notice they say cover letter here, and it's optional. Most recent performance appraisal, if applicable. And then it describes some other criteria that you would have to meet. The how to apply section, you always want to read through that carefully because it's not going to be done exactly the same way for every agency. So it's going to tell you, you want to submit the required documents that are listed in this announcement, and then it'll give you more specifics about how to apply. And typically that'll be electronically using the process I'm going to show you in just a little bit. Notice that every announcement has agency contact information, not necessarily a person, but it'll give you a help desk or some office that you could call or email in order to get more information. And you want to save this so that when the announcement closes to the public, you have that information on hand. Maybe you print that announcement off so that you can use it later in case you have to reach someone to see how things are going. And there's some additional information here as well about benefits and other things. So this is the general layout of a job announcement. Let's talk about how to actually apply. But let me just give me one moment. I want to see something else here just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. So when you decide to apply for an announcement, here's what you do. Let's say you wanted to apply for this administrative program assistant. Okay. You can hit apply. Okay. And then it'll start taking you through a 5-step process. And this is what it looks like. The first step is to select a resume. The second is to select your supporting documents. The third is to review the package to make sure that you have everything that's required. The fourth are demographic details. The 5 is survey information. Actually, so 6 steps. They split the 4th step into 2. The 5th is survey, and then 6th is to continue your application. So that 6th step is always going to be that moving over to the agency to finish your application. So in this example, let's just take it through. We won't actually submit this, but we'll go as far as we can take it. So when you select a resume, in this example, we have 3 different resumes in here. Remember, 3 of 5 potential resumes. And I mentioned that I would say something about searchable resumes. Well, resumes, you can make one resume, what's called searchable. That is used by agencies in a process whereby if they're looking for individuals in USA Jobs that have certain skill sets or are eligible for certain special hiring authorities, they could search the USA Jobs database, and anyone who has made their resume searchable would indicate to the agency that they could potentially be eligible for that position. And then they'd be contacted by the agency. Doesn't mean that you're automatically being selected for, considered for that. However, what it does mean is that the agency can contact you and make you aware of that announcement so that you can apply if you decide to do so. Okay, so you can make one resume searchable. Now, in this example, for this position, we're going to select this resume here, and notice it puts in a green check mark. And you could always add your resume down here. We'll come back to that. If you select that one resume, notice that this circle now is green because it's completed. Okay. And then you can go to the second step. Okay, so in this example, it's not letting me go on. Let me select a different resume and see if it'll let me do that. Okay. All right, let me try this one here and see if it works. If not, I'll just talk you through the process. Here we go. Okay, so the application process is progress is saved. The second thing is to select your documents. So let's select just these 2 here. So this is one. Actually, let's do a DD 214. Let's do transcripts. So notice that those are checked now. And then you save and continue. And now step two is done. Then you're going to review your package. And on the right-hand side, it gives you a reminder of what the required documents are. And you look and you say, okay, I have my resume. There it is. These are the documents they requested. There they are. And you acknowledge that you've reviewed it and everything is where it needs to be. You save and continue. Now you're up to step 4. Demographic details. If you want to share demographic details, you can do that. If you decide not to do that, you can decline, and then you can continue. Then there's a survey asking how you learned about the job. And I'll just say I prefer not to answer, save and continue. So it's pretty straightforward. And then once you do save and continue.
Hey, Carlos.
Yes.
So we will lose our interpreter in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So I was wondering if perhaps we could go to some of the questions in the chat, just so that we can make sure that we get
Sure, we could do that. We're actually sort of at the end of the presentation anyway, because the last step after the survey is to continue your application. And what will happen is that electronically, everything will be bundled and submitted to the agency. And then at that point, you complete whatever's necessary at the agency level. And that will allow you now to complete your application. And then you're now waiting to see what happens next. The one thing I do want to do before questions, because this question may come up, is in your on your dashboard, you can find out what's happening with your application. So if you go, for example, to this administrative officer and you go to track the application, you can track it, and it's going to take you to the section that'll show you step by step what is happening with your application. And sometimes people want to know what happens after. And in this example, it shows you that this application was received. So therefore, you can get more information. You can select that detail, and it'll tell you the specific letter and other information. And that way you can understand what's happening with your application. Now, in some cases, if you don't find that information, what will happen is that you will want to contact the agency directly to find out what actually happened to that application. Okay, so that I didn't get a chance to show you the resume builder, but just understand that in the resume section, you can in fact build a resume from scratch, or you can import your own resume. So other than that, I pretty much covered everything else that I wanted to cover, and I'm open for questions now. Is there anything that I can review or clarify?
Breen, did you want to read out the questions?
Yep. So we have lots of really great questions.
Okay.
I can start with the first one, which is, could you please discuss at some point to what degree we should be matching our resumes to the qualifications listed in the posting, and what keywords?
Okay, so this is a question that comes up often, because sometimes people have the impression that there is a massive computer system that screens out all applications that do not meet what are called keywords. And there's a long, detailed answer to that. But let me just say that it's a myth. It's only partly true that some agencies will use a computer system to do some sort of screening, but you should assume that a human being, a human resources person, is going to be reviewing your application. So the short answer is you want to prepare your resume in such a way that you use language that reflects the language in the duties and qualifications section of the job announcement. If you incorporate that kind of language in the body of your resume, that's going to help the HR person to see clearly how you meet the qualifications for the job, how you meet the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And that's going to help you more than any keywords. Presumed keywords will help you. So for example, when you prepare your resume, you want to, don't say something like, if you're applying for a budget analyst position, I prepared budgets. Be specific and say, I was the team lead for a $3 million budget and I helped save my agency $200,000. That's going to show the scope and the breadth and the depth of what you've done, and it's going to give a lot more information than any presumed keywords. So great question. Other questions?
We had a bunch of other questions about just scheduled hiring. If you can just do a quick overview of the different types of scheduled hiring, like Schedule A.
Okay, so I don't, that,
hiring preferences.
so there are different tiers but that's really a technical answer. That's probably not best for this forum, but there are certain schedules that are designated for different types of hiring. For example, if you're applying for pathways, okay, if you look in the regulations, these schedule A, B, C, D, they refer to certain sections of the law and regulation in particular that describe that type of hiring. So if you're applying for pathways positions, for example, you're typically applying under Schedule D. If you're applying for attorney positions, you're typically applying under Schedule A. There are different types of Schedule A. That's why I don't want to get too deeply into this, because it gets rather confusing and it's really not relevant for a broad discussion. But attorneys are Schedule A, but also individuals who qualify for because of certain types of disabilities are also Schedule A, but a subset of that. And there are others that I won't go into right now. But so what you want to do is don't worry so much about the schedules per se, but worry about the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are described in the job announcement, because that's going to be what you're going to need to focus on to know if you are considered qualified for that job. Okay. What else can I help with?
Okay, another question is, when in the AmeriCorps Vista process should people apply for federal jobs? Is it a few months before the one-year term is up?
Okay, so I'm not going to go into, because I'd have to review some of that because I don't know that information off the top of my head. So I'm not going to go into the specifics of particular hiring authorities, but here's what I'll suggest. If you go into that hiring path section that I described in USA Jobs, go specifically for the ones for AmeriCorps Vista, and then it'll give you, and there's this one there for Peace Corps as well and others, and it will give you more specific information and give you details, perhaps on documents that need to be submitted and other particulars with regard to the regulations and how things work in terms of applying for those jobs. It gets very specific and detailed, and it's not things that I know off the top of my head. So I'd have to go back and research that for you. Okay. Anything else about the general hiring process or about resumes, et cetera?
About veterans, veteran status, could you go over a little bit of how those preferences are used as far as ranking and considering candidates and their qualifications?
Okay, so veterans preference is another one of those areas that's very detailed, and there's much more than meets the eye. But generally speaking, if you meet certain conditions, not every veteran will meet those conditions. So you have to go and research that on the, for example, on the vets, Feds Hire Vets site. I'll give you that URL in a minute. There are certain types of veterans that meet specific conditions, timeframes, et cetera, that would be eligible for what's called veterans preference. Veterans preference allows you to be considered over and beyond other individuals who are applying who do not have veterans preference. For example, if you are, when you are rated and ranked, you fall within a particular category, there's a process that allows you to be rated and ranked and put into typically 3 categories. So the lowest category might be qualified, the middle, this is one example. The lowest qualified may be qualified, the middle category, well qualified, and the top best qualified. So what'll happen is when names are referred on that certificate to the hiring official, they will select from among the top tier in order to consider them for employment before they'll go to any of the other tiers. Within any of those categories, if you are granted veterans preference, you can float to the top of that particular category. And if you meet certain conditions as a disabled veteran, you will float all the way to the top of the list. And typically, and I say typically because there are certain things that can be that might make a difference there, but under typical conditions, a non-veteran in that same list with a veteran cannot be selected for that job before the veteran can be. So veterans preference allows you the ability to be hired without over and above a non-veteran. And there, like I said, this is a very surface level, but if you go to fedshirevets.gov, fedshirevets.gov, all one word, fedshirevets.gov, that is the website where our folks at OPM, who are experts in the veteran with regard to veterans preference and with regard to special hiring authorities for veterans, they can give you a lot more information on that. Because in addition to preference, there are special hiring authorities that are open for veterans that are not available to non-veterans. Okay. How are we doing with time? Do we still have some
We
time?
are at time now. So thank you, everyone. I know there were a lot of questions in the chat. We will certainly be sending out resources to help address some of these questions. And we will certainly be in touch. And this recording will also be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out another reminder of that when that goes out. Just fantastic that everyone could join, and hopefully we'll be able to connect you to more resources in the future.
And I want to also point out to remember that we will be starting up these sessions again publicly. So keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you,
Yes, we
everyone, for
will
great
certainly
questions.
Send out that information as well. So
Absolutely.
lots more. Thank you so much, Carlos. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Libby, for helping screen those questions. And we will certainly be in touch. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.